The stars looked different this far from home. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, watching the alien sun cast strange purple light across the view screen. 3 years into humanity's first deep space mission, and every day still brought new wonders that made Earth feel like a distant memory. "Commander, we're getting some weird readings from the planet below," called out Lisa Carter from the pilot station. Her voice carried the excitement of someone who had spent months flying through empty space and finally found something interesting. Jake walked over to look at her screen. The planet looked dead from space, just another chunk of rock circling. A dying star. But the sensors were picking up something unusual buried deep beneath the surface. "What kind of readings?" Jake asked. "Metal structures. Really old ones by the look of it. And there's some kind of power source still active down there." Paul Davis looked up from his engineering station. He was a big man with steady hands who could fix anything on the ship. Could be valuable salvage. "Alien tech might help us understand how faster-than-light travel really works." Helen Brooks, their chief scientist, was already running calculations. On her computer, she'd joined the mission to study alien life. But so far they had found nothing but empty worlds and dead civilizations. "The power signature is unlike anything in our databases," Helen said. "Whatever built this has technology far beyond our current level." Jake felt a familiar mix of excitement and caution. Every first contact protocol they had studied back on Earth warned about approaching unknown alien technology. But they were explorers, and this was exactly what they had come to find. "All right, people, suit up. We're going down to take a look." 2 hours later, Jake found himself walking across a barren landscape under an alien sky. The surface was covered in a fine red dust that crunched under their boots. Lisa had landed the shuttle in a crater near the strongest energy readings. "The structures are about half a mile that way," Paul said, checking his scanner. "Whatever. They are. They're big." The team walked in silence, their breathing the only sound in the thin atmosphere. Jake had been on dozens of planetary surveys, but something about this place felt different. Wrong somehow. They found the entrance carved into the side of a cliff. Ancient symbols covered the stone walls, worn smooth by countless years of wind and weather. The opening lead down into darkness. "Power levels are getting stronger," Helen reported. "There's definitely something active down there." Jake switched on his helmet light and led the way into the tunnel. The walls were covered in more symbols, and as they went deeper, the carvings became more detailed. Jake could make out pictures of stars and planets and what looked like spaceships. "Look at this," Lisa whispered, pointing to a section of wall. The carving showed a large fleet of ships surrounding a planet. "It's like a star map or something." They followed the tunnel deeper until it opened into a vast underground chamber. In the center sat a device that looked like a crystal the size of a small building. It pulsed with soft blue light, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "My God," Helen breathed. "It's some kind of data storage device. And it's still functioning after all this time." Paul approached the crystal carefully, his scanner beeping rapidly. "The power source is stable. It looks like it's been waiting for someone to find it." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. "Waiting for someone? What makes you say that?" Before Paul could answer, the crystal suddenly flared brighter. Symbols appeared in the air above it, glowing with the same blue light. Then a voice filled the chamber, speaking in perfect English. "If you can understand these words, then your species has developed space travel. I am sorry, but I must warn you of the danger that comes." The 4 humans stood frozen as the voice continued. It sounded tired, ancient, like someone who had carried a terrible burden for far too long. "My people were called the Canthri. We built this warning system before our world was destroyed by the Zephyrian Empire. They have ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years, conquering every species they encounter." Jake felt his blood turn cold. A galactic empire that had been active for 10,000 years. Earth's entire recorded history was only a fraction of that time. The Zephyrians do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They arrive in massive fleets and demand complete surrender. Those who resist are destroyed. Those who submit become slaves. Images appeared in the air above the crystal, showing battles. In space, Huge ships with strange designs fired weapons that turned planets into dust. Jake watched whole civilizations disappear in moments. We tried to warn other species, but we were too late. The Empire moves faster than news can travel. By the time a world knows the threat exists, the invasion fleets are already in their system. Helen grabbed Jake's arm. "Commander, if this is real, ... The voice from the crystal continued as if it had heard her. "I know this message brings terrible news, but knowledge is the only weapon we can give you. The Empire's next target in this sector is a small yellow star with 9 planets. The 3rd planet shows signs of a developing civilization." Jake's heart stopped. A yellow star with 9 planets. Earth. Their scout ships should reach your system within the next few months. The main invasion fleet will follow within a year. I am sorry. I wish we could offer more than just this warning. The image is changed, showing technical details of Zephyrian ships and weapons. Jake tried to focus on the information, but his mind kept returning to one terrible fact. Earth was next. Your only hope is to do what we could not. Unite your people. Quickly, prepare for war against an enemy with technology beyond your understanding. And remember that the Empire has never faced true defeat. They expect all species to surrender when faced with their might. The crystal's light began to fade. This message will repeat for any who find it. May your species prove stronger than ours. May you succeed where we failed. The chamber fell into darkness, leaving only the glow from their helmet lights. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Lisa broke the silence first. "We have to get back to Earth. We have to warn them." "With what proof?" Paul asked. "A talking crystal in an alien ruin. They'll think we've lost our minds." Helen was already scanning. The device, with every instrument they had brought, the crystal contains massive amounts of data. Technical specifications, star charts, battle records. "If we can download it all, ... Do it," Jake ordered. "Copy everything we leave in 1 hour." As Helen worked to extract the data, Jake stood staring at the darkened crystal. An ancient alien had built this warning system, knowing that his own people were doomed, but hoping that others might have a chance. The weight of that sacrifice pressed down on him like a physical force. "Commander," Lisa said quietly, "what are we going to tell Earth Command?" Jake thought about the images they had seen. Massive ships that could crack planets. Weapons beyond human understanding. It was an empire that had crushed every enemy for 10,000 years. We tell them the truth. That we found evidence of a galactic empire that destroys civilizations for sport. That Earth is their next target. And if they don't believe us? Jake looked around the chamber at the ancient warning left by a dead species. Then humanity joins. The Canthrian extinction. But if there's even a chance they'll listen, we have to try. The data download finished, and they made their way back to the surface in grim silence. Above them, the alien stars looked less beautiful now. Somewhere out there, an invasion fleet was already heading toward Earth, as the Phoenix jumped too faster than light speed. Beginning the long journey home, Jake wondered if they would arrive in time to make a difference. Canthry had failed to save their people. Could humanity do better? Behind them, the crystal in the underground chamber began to glow again, ready to deliver its warning to the next species that might stumble across it. But Jake Morrison and his crew were already racing toward Earth with news that would change everything. Nobody expected the humans to triumph against a galactic empire. But then again, nobody had asked the humans what they thought about it. Admiral Kate Sullivan had seen many emergency briefings in her 30 years of military service, but nothing like this. The conference room at Earth Defense Command was packed with the most important people on the planet. Presidents, generals, scientists, and intelligence chiefs all sat in stunned silence as commander. Morrison finished his report. The holographic display showed images from the alien crystal. Massive ships destroying planets. Entire civilizations wiped out in hours. At the center of it all, the terrible truth that Earth was next on the list. President Ryan Kelly was the first to speak. His voice was steady, but Kate could see the fear in his eyes. "Commander Morrison, you're asking us to believe that an alien empire has been conquering the galaxy for 10,000 years, and we're their next target." "I know how it sounds, sir," Morrison replied. "But the data doesn't lie. Dr. Brooks has confirmed that the crystal's information is genuine. The technology signatures match what we observed. Dr. Marcus Lane stood up from his seat. He was Earth's leading expert on theoretical physics, and his word carried weight with everyone in the room. I've analyzed the technical data from the crystal. The Zephyrian Empire possesses technology that's centuries beyond our current capabilities. Lane activated his own holographic display, showing detailed scans of the alien ships. Their vessels are powered by controlled antimatter reactions. Their weapons can generate focused gravity waves that literally tear matter apart, and their defensive shields can adapt to incoming attacks in real time. General Scott Hayes leaned forward in his chair. He was a hard man who had fought in every major conflict of the past 20 years. What are our chances in a straight fight? Honestly, none, Lane replied. A single Zephyrian dreadnought carries more firepower than our entire space fleet. Their smallest scout ship could level New York in minutes. The room erupted in worried voices. Kate watched as some of the world's most powerful people struggled to accept the reality of their situation. Earth faced an enemy that could destroy them without effort. There has to be something we can do, said General Chenwei, Earth's military commander. We don't just roll over and die. Dr. Amy Foster, Lane's research partner, stood up. She was young but brilliant, and Kate had heard good things about her work. Actually, there might be hope, but not in the way you'd expect. Foster activated another display, this one showing brain scans and genetic data, while analyzing the alien information. We discovered something interesting about human physiology compared to other galactic species. She pointed to a series of neural pathway diagrams. Most alien species show highly structured thought patterns. Their brains work in predictable, logical sequences. It makes them excellent at following complex procedures and maintaining stable civilizations and humans, President Kelly asked. Humans are different. Our neural networks are chaotic, unpredictable. We excel at creative problem-solving and adaptability. What other species would call mental instability, we call innovation. Morrison stepped forward. The crystal's data includes records of hundreds of conquered civilizations. Every single one followed the same pattern when faced with the Empire. They tried to match Zephyrian technology and tactics. They all failed. Because they were thinking like the Zephyrians expected them to think, Foster continued. Don't think that way. We break rules. We improvise. We do things that logical minds consider impossible. General Hayes raised an eyebrow. You're saying our best weapon against this empire is being crazy? Not crazy. Unpredictable. Lane corrected. Dr. Foster is right. If we try to fight the Zephyrians with conventional tactics, we'll lose. But if we can exploit their reliance on predictable behavior patterns. Kate felt a spark of hope for the first time since Morrison's briefing began. What exactly are you suggesting? Foster looked around the room. Asymmetric warfare taken to an extreme level. Small, highly mobile units using tactics that seem suicidal. To any logical military mind, hit and run attacks that make no strategic sense. Weapons and defenses that violate every rule of proper military doctrine. The Zephyrians have conquered thousands of worlds, Morrison added. But they've never faced an enemy willing to fight like humans fight. Desperate, creative, and completely unpredictable. President Kelly stood up. Even if this works, we're talking about preparing for war against an interstellar empire? We have months, not years. Then we do what humans do best, General Hayes said with a grim smile. We improvise. The next few weeks transformed Earth in ways that seemed impossible. Old enemies became allies overnight as the reality of the external threats sank in. Russian engineers worked alongside American scientists. Chinese manufacturers retooled their factories to build weapons. Designed by European researchers, Kate found herself coordinating the largest military mobilization in human history. But this wasn't like any war preparation she had ever seen. Instead of building bigger guns and stronger armor, Earth's military was focusing on speed, stealth, and surprise. Paul Davis had been promoted to chief engineer of the defense project. He worked 18-hour days designing ships that looked more like asteroids than military vessels. The idea is to hide in plain sight, he explained to Kate during one of her inspection tours. The Zephyrians will be looking for military formations, and battle fleets. They won't expect weapons platforms disguised as space junk. In another facility, Lisa Carter was training a new generation of pilots. But these weren't ordinary flight lessons. "Forget everything you know about proper flying," she told her students. "We're going to teach you to pilot like drunk teenagers. Erratic, unpredictable, seemingly random movements that no computer can predict." Helen Brooks had become Earth's leading expert on Zephyrian psychology. She spent her days analyzing the battle records from the crystal, looking for patterns in how the Empire fought. "They're incredibly efficient," she reported to Kate. "Every attack follows optimal mathematical principles.
Wow.
Balance, that's their strength, but it's also their weakness." "How so?" Kate asked. "They can't adapt quickly to chaos. Their tactical computers are designed to counter logical military strategies. But what happens when the enemy doesn't follow? Any logical strategy at all?" The question was answered during Earth's first major test exercise, a mock battle between traditional military units and the new Chaos Squadrons. Ended with the conventional forces being completely outmaneuvered by opponents who seemed to be making up their tactics as they went along. Tony Phillips, one of Earth's top engineers, had been working on reverse engineering captured Zephyrian technology. But instead of copying it exactly, he was finding ways to turn it against itself. "Their adaptive shields are incredibly sophisticated," he explained to the research team. "They're designed to counter massive energy attacks. What they can't handle is thousands of tiny, inconsistent energy pulses hitting them from random directions." As Earth's preparations continued, long-range sensors detected the first signs of the approaching threat. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center watching the display screens that showed the edge of the solar system. "Contact," the sensor operator reported. Multiple vessels dropping out of hyperspace near the orbit of Pluto. Kate felt her heart rate increase. Size and composition. 3 ships, medium size. Consistent with the scout vessel profiles from the alien data, this was it. The Zephyrian Empire had arrived. President Kelly joined Kate in the command center. "Are we ready?" Kate looked around at the displays showing Earth's unconventional defenses. Hidden weapon platforms disguised as asteroids. Squadrons of fighters that flew like they were piloted by madmen. Ground forces trained to fight in ways that defied every rule of military logic. "We're as ready as we can be, sir. The question is whether the Zephyrians are ready for us." The scout ships moved deeper into the solar system, their sensors scanning everything they encountered. Kate knew they were cataloging Earth's defenses, preparing reports for the main invasion fleet. But they were looking for the wrong things. They expected to find military installations, battle fleets, and defensive formations. Instead, they were scanning what appeared to be a barely defended world with primitive technology. "Let them look," Kate said quietly. "Let them think we're helpless." In a few months, the full Zephyrian invasion fleet would arrive, expecting an easy victory over another primitive species. They had no idea that humanity had spent every day since Morrison's discovery preparing the most unconventional defense in galactic history. The humans were about to teach the galaxy's greatest empire that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to fight by the rules. Commander Alex Turner floated in the darkness of space, watching the Zephyrian scout ship through his helmet display. The alien vessel was sleek and deadly, its hull gleaming with an energy field that could probably deflect anything Earth's military could throw at it. But Alex wasn't planning to throw anything at it. He was planning to steal it. The stealth ship Ranger hung motionless in the shadow of an asteroid, completely invisible to the scout's sensors. Alex's team had been waiting here for 3 days, studying the alien patrol routes and looking for the perfect opportunity. "Target is maintaining standard sweep pattern," reported Nina Ross from the communications station. She was their best code breaker, able to crack encryption systems that stumped entire government agencies. "Their scanning cycle has a 12-second gap every 4 minutes. Ben Clark checked his tactical display. He was a former Special Forces operator who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. "EMP charges are ready. We'll have maybe 30 seconds before their backup systems come online." Greg Stone, their cultural analyst, was monitoring the alien communications. He had learned to read Zephyrian language patterns from the crystal data. They're getting ready to move to the next sector. If we're going to do this, it has to be now. Alex took a deep breath. The plan was completely insane by any reasonable military standard. They were going to disable a technologically superior alien ship, board it in spacesuits, and somehow capture the crew alive. Every simulation. They had run ended in disaster, but that was exactly why it might work. All right, people. Let's show these aliens how humans fight. Nina, start the jamming sequence. Ben, prepare for EMP deployment. The Ranger moved out of the asteroid's shadow like a hunting shark. The ship had been designed to look like space. Debris, covered in fake metal plating and random equipment that masked its true nature. To the Zephyrian scouts, it would appear to be just another piece of junk floating in the void. Impaway, Ben announced as the Ranger closed to optimal range. The electromagnetic pulse hit the scout ship like an invisible hammer. For a few precious seconds, every electronic system on the alien vessel went dead. Emergency lighting flickered as backup power systems struggled to compensate. Alex didn't waste time. The Ranger's magnetic clamps locked onto the scout ship's hull with a sound that echoed through both vessels. Move, move, move. The boarding team cut through the alien airlock in under 20 seconds. Alex had trained for this moment for months, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of stepping onto an enemy ship in the middle of space. The Zephyrian crew was waiting for them. 3 aliens in combat armor, armed with weapons that hummed with deadly energy. They were tall and thin, with pale skin and large black eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The aliens expected a firefight. They had positioned themselves in a defensive formation that would allow them to cover all approach routes while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. It was textbook military tactics. So Alex threw his weapon at the nearest alien and tackled him barehanded. The Zephyrian warrior was stronger than a human, but he had never fought an enemy who completely ignored proper combat procedure. Well, he tried to figure out why Alex had thrown away his weapon. Ben hit him with a stun grenade at point-blank range. The other 2 aliens tried to adapt their formation, but Greg had already crawled through a maintenance hatch and attacked them from behind with a jury-rigged taser. Nina disabled their communications equipment by pouring coffee on the control panel. In less than 2 minutes, the most advanced scout ship in the Zephyrian fleet had been captured by 4 humans, using tactics that no military academy would ever teach. Secure the prisoners, Alex ordered as he caught his breath. Nina, can you access their computer systems? Already on it, she replied, connecting her equipment to the alien ship's data core. Their security is impressive, but they weren't expecting someone to hack them from the inside while pouring liquid on their hardware. The lead Zephyrian prisoner looked at Alex with something that might have been confusion. When he spoke, his words were translated by Greg's equipment. You fight without honor, without logic. How do you expect to defeat a superior enemy with such chaos? Alex smiled. Yeah, that's exactly how we expect to defeat you. Over the next several hours, the human team learned more about their enemy than Earth's intelligence services had discovered in months of analysis. The Zephyrians called themselves the Eternal Empire, and they had been conquering the galaxy for so long that they could no longer imagine losing a war. They've fought thousands of species, Greg reported as he analyzed the scout ship's database. But every single enemy has followed the same pattern. Form defensive lines, build bigger weapons, try to match Zephyrian technology, and was examining the alien weapons and armor. Their equipment is designed to counter energy weapons and explosive devices. But look at this. He showed Alex a section of the alien's armor that had been damaged during the boarding action. The material is incredibly strong against directed force, but it tears easily when twisted. Nina had been studying the scout ship's communication. Logs, Commander, you need to see this. They've been sending reports back to the main fleet about Earth's defenses. Alex looked at the translated messages on Nina's screen. According to the Zephyrian scouts, Earth was a barely defended world with primitive technology and a divided population. The reports recommended a minimal invasion force that could conquer the planet in a matter of days. They're completely wrong. About us, Alex realized. They're seeing what they expect to see, because they're looking for the wrong things, Greg added. They're scanning for military installations, battle fleets, and orbital defense platforms. They don't recognize our actual defenses because they don't look like proper military equipment. Alex felt a spark of inspiration. Nina, can you access their communication system? Already have, she replied with a grin. I've been learning. Their protocols while you were talking? Good. I want you to send a message to the main fleet. Tell them that Earth's defenses are even weaker than originally reported. Make it sound like we're completely helpless. Ben raised an eyebrow. You want to make them overconfident? I want to make them careless, Alex corrected. If they think we're no threat at all, they won't bring their full fleet. They'll send just enough ships to handle a primitive species. Over the next week, the captured scout ship became the center of Earth's intelligence operation. Nina sent carefully crafted reports to the Zephyrian fleet, painting a picture of a world that couldn't possibly resist invasion. Meanwhile, Greg and Ben studied every piece of alien technology they could access. The breakthrough came when Ben discovered that Zephyrian weapons had a fatal flaw. Their energy systems are incredibly sophisticated, he explained to the team. But they're designed to fire in specific patterns based on tactical algorithms. Meaning if you can predict the algorithm, you can predict where they're going to shoot. And if you can predict where they're going to shoot, you can avoid it. Greg was nodding excitedly. It's the same with their ship movements. Everything follows. Mathematical optimization. They always take the most efficient route, use the most logical tactics, position themselves for maximum strategic advantage, which makes them predictable, Alex concluded. They're so focused on fighting efficiently that they can't adapt when the enemy doesn't fight efficiently. Nina looked up from her communication station. Commander, I'm getting reports from Earth. Command. Long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace distortions at the edge of the system. Alex felt his stomach tighten. The main fleet has to be. The energy signatures match what we'd expect from a full invasion force. The team worked frantically to upload all their intelligence data to Earth's defense network. Every scrap of information about Zephyrian technology, tactics, and psychology was transmitted to Admiral Sullivan's headquarters as the Ranger prepared to return to Earth with its captured prize. Alex took one last look at the Zephyrian prisoners. They sat in their cell, still unable to understand how such a superior species could be defeated by creatures who fought without logic or honor. You cannot win, the lead prisoner said through the translator. The Eternal Empire has conquered. 1,000 worlds, your tactics are chaos. Chaos cannot defeat order. Alex thought about the massive invasion fleet that was even now approaching Earth. Ships that could crack planets. Weapons beyond human understanding. It's an empire that had never known defeat. Maybe you're right, Alex replied. But you're about to find out what happens when chaos doesn't care about the odds. The scout ship had served its purpose. Earth now knew exactly what they were facing, and more importantly, they knew how their enemy thought, the Zephyrians expected. To find a weak, divided world that would surrender at the first show of force, instead, they were about to encounter something that had never existed in their 10,000 years of conquest. An enemy that refused to fight by any rules they understood. The Zephyrian invasion fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a dark storm cloud blotting out the stars. Admiral Korthvek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching his tactical display show the primitive world that would soon bow before the Empire's might. 200 ships had come to conquer Earth, massive dreadnoughts that could shatter moons, swift destroyers armed with planet-killing weapons, and carrier vessels filled with fighter craft. It was more firepower than most star systems had ever seen in one place, but to Korthvex it seemed like overkill. The scout reports had painted a picture of a barely defended world with primitive technology. The humans had chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They might as well have been throwing rocks at the stars. Begin the standard approach, Korthvex commanded. All ships maintain formation. Prepare for immediate planetary bombardment once we reach optimal range. On Earth, Colonel Pete Morgan watched the alien fleet approach from his hidden command center buried deep in the Rocky Mountains. The displays around him showed the massive enemy formation, each ship larger than anything humanity had ever built. Sir, the orbital platforms are in position, reported his communications officer. All units are standing by. Pete looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. To anyone watching from space, the planet looked almost undefended. A few primitive satellites, some old space stations, and scattered pieces of orbital debris. The Zephyrians would see exactly what they expected to see. They wouldn't see the weapons hidden inside that debris. "Wait for my signal," Pete ordered. "Let them get comfortable first." The Zephyrian fleet moved deeper into the solar system with the confidence of conquerors who had never known defeat. Their formation was perfect, their spacing optimal, their approach route mathematically calculated for maximum efficiency. Captain Sam Hughes sat in the cockpit of his fighter, hidden inside what looked like a derelict cargo container floating near Mars. Around him, 50 other human pilots waited in similar hiding places, their ships disguised as space junk and abandoned. Satellites. "Remember what we practiced?" Sam spoke into his radio. "Don't fly like pilots. Fly like drunk teenagers who stole their parents' car." The alien fleet passed through the outer system without detecting a single human military unit. Their sensors found exactly what the scout reports had predicted: a weak species with no real defenses. Admiral Korthvex was beginning to feel disappointed. He had hoped for at least some resistance, perhaps a brave but futile gesture that would make the conquest more interesting. Instead, the humans seemed to be hiding like frightened children. "Sir, we're detecting some orbital debris around the third planet," reported his sensor officer. "Appears to be inactive satellites and construction materials." "Standard procedure," Korthvex replied with a dismissive wave. "Clear the orbit with focused fire, then proceed with planetary bombardment." That was exactly what Pete Morgan had been waiting for. "All units, this is command. The enemy has entered optimal range. Execute Plan Chaos." Space around Earth suddenly came alive with weapons fire. What the Zephyrians had dismissed as orbital debris revealed itself to be an intricate network of hidden gun platforms, missile launchers, and energy weapons. But they weren't firing in any pattern that made sense. Some platforms shot at the nearest enemy ship, others aimed at targets on the far side of the formation. Few seemed to be firing at random points in empty space. The attack looked like complete chaos, the desperate flailing of a doomed species. Korthvex watched the primitive weapons. Fire bounce harmlessly off his ship's shields. Pathetic. Their weapons cannot even penetrate our basic defenses. But his tactical officer was frowning at his display. "Sir, something's wrong with our defensive grid. The energy patterns are causing interference." Zephyrian shields were designed to absorb and deflect massive energy attacks. They could withstand the focused fire of entire battle fleets. But they had never faced thousands of small, seemingly random energy pulses hitting them from every direction at once. Each individual human weapon was too weak to damage the alien ships. But together, they created an overlapping field of energy interference that slowly overloaded the Zephyrian defense systems. "Shields are fluctuating across the fleet," the tactical officer reported with growing alarm. "The interference is building up faster than our systems can compensate." Before Korthvex could respond, Sam Hughes and his fighter squadron emerged from their hiding places. But instead of forming an attack formation, they scattered in all directions like a flock of startled birds. "What are they doing?" Korthvex demanded, watching the human fighters weave through space in patterns that hurt his head to follow. "There's no logic to their movements." Sam pulled his fighter into a spiral dive that would have gotten him expelled from any proper flight academy. Behind him, his wingman Lucy Barnes flew in a corkscrew pattern while firing her weapons at seemingly random targets. The Zephyrian point defense systems tried to lock onto the human fighters, but the targeting computers couldn't predict where the erratic ships would be from one second to the next. "How do you calculate the intercept course for a target that seems to be making up its flight path as it goes?" "Sir, our automated defenses are having difficulty engaging the enemy fighters," reported the weapons officer. "Their flight patterns don't match any known tactical doctrines." Major Claire Watson coordinated the ground defenses as Zephyrian landing craft broke through the orbital battle. But when the alien troops reached Earth's surface, they found an enemy that refused to fight according to any military manual. Human soldiers popped up from sewers, attacked from inside buildings that should have been empty, and used weapons that looked like they had been built in someone's garage, because many of them had been. A squad of Zephyrian warriors advanced down a city street in perfect formation, their energy shields raised and their weapons ready for standard urban combat. They were hit by a modified construction vehicle driven by a retired mechanic named Bob Taylor, who had welded armor plating to a bulldozer and filled it. With homemade explosives, the aliens had shields that could stop energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They didn't have shields that could stop a crazy human and a weaponized bulldozer in space. The battle was reaching its climax. Lieutenant Commander Roy Baker had been studying the captured Zephyrian technology for weeks. Looking for any weakness they could exploit, he found it in the most unlikely place. "Colonel Morgan, I've got something," Roy reported from his analysis. "Station. The enemy flagship's power grid has a critical vulnerability." "What kind of vulnerability?" Pete asked. "Their main reactor is designed to handle massive energy loads, but it's sensitive to frequency modulation. If we can hit it with specific energy pulses at exactly the right intervals, we can cause a cascade failure." Pete looked at his tactical display. The Zephyrian flagship was the largest ship he had ever seen, protected by shields that had shrugged off everything Earth's weapons could throw at it. "How do we generate enough power for that kind of attack?" "We don't," Roy replied with a grin. "We use their own power against them. I can modify our transmission array to send a focused signal that will cause their reactor to overload itself." It was the kind of plan that would never work in a logical universe. But logic had never been humanity's strong suit. Amy Foster coordinated the attack from her laboratory using equipment that she had literally built from spare parts and alien technology. Frequency modulation is locked in, targeting the flagship's main reactor. "Fire," Pete ordered. The signal that hit the Zephyrian flagship was barely detectable by their sensors. It looked like background radiation, the kind of random energy that filled empty space. The ship's defensive systems ignored it completely. But inside the Eternal Dominion's reactor core, that innocent signal triggered a chain reaction that the ship's designers had never imagined possible. Power levels spiked beyond all safety limits. Emergency systems failed as the cascade spread through the entire power grid. Admiral Korthvex watched in shock as his mighty flagship began to tear itself apart from the inside. How is this possible? What weapon could do this? He would never get an answer. The Eternal Dominion exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire solar system. The flagship that had conquered hundreds of worlds was destroyed by a signal so weak that most races would have dismissed it as cosmic noise. The rest of the Zephyrian fleet stared in horror at the expanding debris field, where their command ship had been. For the first time in 10,000 years, an Imperial fleet faced the possibility of defeat, and they had no idea how to handle it. The humans weren't done yet. As the alien ships tried to regroup, Sam Hughes led his fighters in one final, impossible attack. They flew straight at the largest remaining dreadnought, weapons blazing, seemingly intent on suicide at the last second. They scattered in all directions, leaving behind a cloud of small objects that the Zephyrian sensors dismissed as debris. Only when those objects detonated did the aliens realize they were looking at the most unconventional minefield in galactic history, the mighty dreadnought. Damaged by the strange explosions and confused by the chaotic human tactics, began to retreat. One by one, the other ships followed. The news spread across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. On 1,000 worlds, enslaved species looked up at their alien masters with something they hadn't felt in generations: hope. The impossible had happened. The Zephyrian Empire had been defeated. Ambassador Julie Parker stood in the observation deck of the newly built starship Freedom, watching as alien vessels approached from 12 different star systems. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Earth, and the galaxy was already changing in ways nobody had expected. "Ambassador, the Corvani delegation is requesting permission to dock," reported her communications officer. Lieutenant Danny Walsh was young but capable, one of the new generation of humans who would help shape the galaxy's future. "Permission granted," Julie replied. "Have them meet us in conference room 1. And Danny, make sure the translation equipment is working properly. Today's discussion will determine the fate of billions." The Corvani were the first species to respond to Earth's message of liberation. They had been fighting a desperate guerrilla war against Zephyrian occupation for over 50 years. Their leader, Zektor, had traveled across half the galaxy to meet with the humans, who had done the impossible. Julie walked into the conference room to find a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a lizard waiting for her. Zektor stood over 7 feet tall, with thick armored skin and eyes that burned with the fire of revolution. Ambassador Parker, Zektor said through the translator, "My people have waited generations for this day. We heard what your species did to the Imperial fleet. How did you accomplish such a victory?" Julie smiled. "We fought like humans." Apparently, that was something the Empire had never encountered before. Over the next several hours, more delegations arrived. The aquatic Delphians sent their greatest strategist, Wavesinger, who communicated through a complex series of sonar pulses. The insectoid Thrace came in massive swarms, their hive mind consciousness speaking as one voice. Even the energy beings known as the Lumina manifested physical forms to attend the meeting. Each species brought the same message. They wanted to learn how to fight like humans. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, joined the conference via holographic link from Earth. "The key isn't copying our technology," he explained to the assembled aliens. "It's changing how you think about warfare itself." "But your tactics make no logical sense," protested the Thrace representative. "How can chaos defeat order? How can inefficiency overcome optimization?" Dr. Helen Brooks, who had become Earth's leading expert on interspecies psychology, answered the question. Because the Zephyrians built their entire military doctrine around fighting logical enemies. When faced with an illogical enemy, their systems break down. On the main display screen, she showed recordings from the Battle of Earth. "Watch how our fighters move." No alien species would fly those patterns because they waste energy and expose the pilot to unnecessary risk. But that unpredictability is exactly what made them impossible to target. Zektor leaned forward, his massive claws clicking on the conference table. "You're saying that our greatest weakness as a species could become our greatest strength?" "It's not your weakness," Julie corrected. "Your uniqueness. Every species thinks differently. Corvain excel at endurance and persistence. The Delphians are masters of fluid tactics. The Thrace can coordinate complex operations across vast distances." Wavesinger's translator converted her sonar speech into words. "The Empire expects each species to fight according to their observed behavioral patterns. But what if we fought against our patterns instead?" "Exactly," Helen replied. "The Zephyrians have detailed files on how every conquered species fights, but they have no data on how species fight when they deliberately ignore their own instincts." Ow. Revolution began slowly, then spread like wildfire across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kether 7, Corvani workers used their natural persistence not to endure their slavery, but to slowly sabotage Imperial equipment in ways that took months to detect. By the time the Zephyrians realized what was happening, their entire mining operation had become useless. The Delphians attacked Imperial shipping lanes, using tactics that flowed like water, striking from unexpected directions and vanishing before the enemy could respond. Their fluid movements confused Zephyrian targeting systems that expected linear attack patterns. The Thrace turned their hive mind coordination against itself, deliberately creating chaos within their ranks that the Empire's control systems couldn't predict or counter. What looked like random worker rebellions were actually precisely coordinated strikes against critical Imperial infrastructure. Back on Earth, Tony Phillips worked with scientists from a dozen species to develop new technologies that combined human creativity with alien engineering. But these weren't copies of Zephyrian designs. They were something entirely new. Empire's biggest advantage is their technological superiority, Tony explained to his mixed species research team. But what if we don't try to match their technology? What if we create something completely different? The breakthrough came when a young Lumina engineer named Brightstar suggested combining human chaos theory with Delphian fluid dynamics and Thrace coordination algorithms. The result was a new type of weapon that didn't follow any known physical laws. "It's not more powerful than Imperial weapons," Tony reported to Admiral Sullivan. "It's just completely unpredictable. Even we don't know exactly what it will do." When we fire it, meanwhile, the Zephyrian Empire was struggling to understand what had gone wrong. Emperor Vorkrek summoned his greatest generals to the Imperial throne world. demanding answers for the impossible defeated Earth. How does a primitive species destroy our most advanced warship? The Emperor asked, his voice echoing through the vast throne room. General Dexmore, the Empire's most experienced military commander, had spent weeks analyzing the battle recordings. Your Majesty, the humans don't fight like any species we've encountered. They seem to deliberately choose the worst possible tactics and somehow make them work. That's impossible, Vorkrax replied. Military science is based on proven principles. Chaos cannot defeat order. Respect, Your Majesty, these humans have proven that our understanding of military science may be incomplete. Anger shook the entire palace. Then we will send a larger fleet. We will overwhelm them with such force that their chaos becomes irrelevant. But as the Empire prepared for a second invasion of Earth, they received reports that changed everything. Rebellions were erupting on worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. The conquered species were fighting with new tactics that the Imperial forces couldn't counter. Admiral Morrison stood in Earth's command center, watching status reports from across the galaxy. How many systems are in rebellion now? Over 200 and counting, reported the intelligence officer. And they're all using variations of the tactics we taught them. Julie Parker's diplomatic mission had grown into something much larger. The Freedom now led a fleet of ships from dozens of species, each one carrying human military advisors who taught alien soldiers how to fight without logic. But the most important change wasn't in tactics or technology. It was in the minds of the galaxy's enslaved peoples. For the first time in 10,000 years, they believed they could win. The final battle came at the Imperial Core Worlds, where Emperor Vorkrax had gathered the largest fleet in Zephyrian history. 5,000 ships, armed with weapons that could destroy star systems, protected by shields that had never been breached. Against them came a motley collection of liberated species, flying ships that looked like they had been built in junkyards. Using tactics that violated every rule of military science, the battle should have lasted minutes. Instead, it raged for 3 days as the Imperial fleet found itself unable to counter an enemy that refused to fight logically. Corvani ships absorbed damage that should have destroyed them and kept fighting. Odelphian vessels flowed through Imperial formations like water through a net. Human fighters darted between massive dreadnoughts like insects, stinging with weapons that worked in ways the Empire couldn't understand. The end came when a combined force of humans and Lumina energy beings penetrated the Emperor's flagship, using a tactic so insane that no Imperial commander had thought to defend against it. They simply flew straight at the ship's main gun and let themselves be pulled into the weapon's energy field, instead of being destroyed. The Lumina absorbed the weapon's power while the humans used the energy surge to overload the ship's entire systems. The Imperial flagship tore itself apart from the inside, taking the Emperor and his command staff with it. Commander Helen Brooks, now serving as Earth's representative to the new Galactic Council, stood in the former Imperial throne room as leaders from across the galaxy gathered to write a new future. The Zephyrian Empire ruled for 10,000 years because they convinced everyone that resistance was impossible, she said to the assembled delegates. They made species believe that order must always defeat chaos, that logic must always overcome creativity. She looked around the room at the dozens of alien species that had once been slaves and were now free. We proved them wrong, not because we were stronger or smarter, but because we refused to accept that victory was impossible. The galaxy would never be the same.